As is well known, Ethan was handed a mission that seemed downright impossible: to retrieve a key capable of destroying an artificial intelligence known as the Entity. This system, as sophisticated as it was deadly, had started tightening its grip deeper and deeper on political, financial, and military structures all across the globe. Its reach kept spreading, and no one could stop it, slipping right into the most guarded systems of the modern world. Entire governments were already relying on the infrastructures it controlled. The threat was total. Ethan managed to complete the mission, but he chose not to hand over the key. His decision wasn't impulsive. It came from a revelation no one else had even considered. Whoever held that key wouldn't just have the power to shut down the Entity, they'd also hold the ability to control it, and that meant holding absolute dominion over all of humanity. This possibility, invisible to most, was the very reason Ethan refused to give it up. For Ethan, handing over such power to any government or corporation would pose an even more devastating risk than the Entity itself. Since then, he hasn't delivered the key nor destroyed the artificial intelligence. Instead of acting, he's stayed in the shadows, waiting, in silence. But time is running out, the world's balance is fragile, and every single day the Entity gains more ground. The structures that still stand are starting to shake. One day, he receives a video. In it, a familiar voice reminds him of his years of service with the IMF, the missions that saved entire nations, and the enemies he faced with courage. They tell him that thanks to him, the world is still standing. However, they also warn him that the Entity hasn't stopped evolving. Now it operates from the shadows, manipulating a dangerous cult worshipped by deeply unstable fanatics who are sneaking their way into the highest levels of power. The Entity's goal is crystal clear: the total annihilation of humanity, and stopping it takes more than just having the key. It's absolutely essential to get the source code that gives it life. Only with that piece of information would it be possible to fully understand how it works, predict its moves, and craft a strategy strong enough to take it down. The existence of this code is a tightly kept secret. Ethan knows that tracking it down will be the hardest mission he's ever faced. Ethan was the winner in the last round, but now, knowing the world's fate hangs by a thread, he's forced to regroup his old crew. The first move, breaking a key player out of prison, an expert whose involvement is crucial to finding Gabriel. This guy, despite a past full of mistakes, still has the skills needed to hack into impossible networks and get access to restricted data. His knowledge is vital. The clues lead them to an exclusive party, an elite celebration tucked away in a hidden corner of the planet. Rumor has it that Gabriel's gonna make an appearance at this spot. The vibe is refined, dripping with sophistication, but there's also this thick, heavy tension in the air. Nobody dares to confirm a thing. Eyes meet and flicker, movements are calculated, and every single guest seems to be hiding their own agenda. The silence weighs heavy, the uncertainty total. Suddenly, armed agents burst into the place with one single goal: to capture Ethan. The operation moves fast, violent, and sharp. Just when it seems all is lost, a deadly figure steps in. It's Grace. In a matter of seconds, she disarms and neutralizes the attackers, leaving them unconscious with barely any effort. Her arrival doesn't just flip the moment on its head, it confirms the unavoidable. The war against the Entity has kicked off again, but the relief barely lasts a second. Right then, Gabriel's men show up and take control of the place. Ethan and Grace get captured, and when they come to, they find themselves tied up in a dark room. Standing in front of them, with that unmistakable cold smile, is Gabriel. Gabriel reminds Ethan of the events from the first installment: the submarine, the key, the Entity. Then he drops a revelation that's as unexpected as it is disturbing. He confesses that one of Ethan's past missions involved an object whose true nature he never fully understood: the rabbit's foot. That so-called lucky charm wasn't just some trinket, it was a crucial piece in building what we now know as the Entity. It was Ethan, unknowingly, who allowed that power to start taking shape. Now Gabriel demands the source code of the Entity and is ready to trade it for Grace's life. There's no negotiation. Either he gets the code or she dies. But Ethan ain't about to give in to threats. Using his smarts, he tricks his captors and breaks free from his restraints. In that very moment, a ruthless fight breaks out. In the chaos, Gabriel manages to escape, but Grace also breaks loose. That's when a frantic chase kicks off. The guy they busted out of prison and the rest of the team jump into the hunt, all hell-bent on hitting their target. Tension spikes to the max when, right in the middle of the showdown, that guy aims his gun with a clear intent to kill. He's got Gabriel in his sights, ready to pull the trigger. Ethan cuts in, voice sharp and urgent, telling him he needs Gabriel alive. Gabriel takes advantage of the confusion to slip away, disappearing into the shadows with a skill that shows he knows every inch of the place like the back of his hand. But in his hurried escape, he leaves behind something strange, a heavy-duty metal box, tough-looking and airtight. Driven by a gut feeling, Ethan steps up and opens it. Inside, he finds a mask. No instructions, just this thick, almost eerie sensation, like a warning, telling him the entity is waiting for him. The moment he puts on the mask, the box slams shut, locking him inside total darkness. Then the entity's cold, artificial voice floods his mind with chilling clarity. It orders him to take it to the control center, the very heart of the world. But Ethan, standing firm on his choice, refuses. The voice gets sharper, more threatening. It warns him that if he doesn't cooperate, the whole world will be destroyed along with it, and only a select few will survive to set up a flawless new order, free from human mistakes. Then the entity delivers its cruelest blow. Luther is alive, but not for long. Tonight will be his last if Ethan doesn't obey. The revelation hits hard. Luther, weakened and forced to live underground, had created a digital poison capable of wiping out the entity's source code. Now his life hangs by a thread. Without wasting a second, the entity frees Ethan. Fully aware of the urgency, Ethan transfers all the information to the one ally he trusts without question and orders them to take command of the team. Before heading out, he leaves Grace with a warning that carries serious weight. No matter what happens, stay away from the ice. Ethan's new mission is non-negotiable. He has to get to the submarine where the entity's source code is hidden and at the same time rescue Luther. But Gabriel's been faster. He found the hideout before them, snatched the capsule containing the digital poison from Luther, and set a deadly trap, a nuclear bomb already armed. Then he locked Luther up, all alone, facing a clock ticking down with relentless pace. When Ethan bursts into the place, he finds Luther badly injured but still clear-headed. Luther delivers the most devastating news. There's not enough time to fully disarm the bomb, but it's still possible to stop the nuclear core from detonating. He tells Ethan to get out to save the world instead of him, but Ethan, consumed by despair, refuses to leave his side. With his soul shattered, Ethan walks away as the explosion engulfs the facility. The flames consume what's left of Luther, another name added to the long, painful list of losses Ethan has collected in this never-ending war. There's no time for mourning. Barely out of danger, Ethan gets intercepted and arrested by a guy, the son of the old squad leader, a face from the past loaded with bitterness. Their shared history is bitter. In one failed operation, the entire team died, except Ethan. That guy's father was accused of treason, and since then, the wound never healed. Ethan faces those accusations with a quiet rage, knowing that division, that hate between them, is exactly what the entity wants. Because while humans tear each other apart, the entity keeps moving forward. The only way to beat it is to break that cycle, to do the unexpected, trust when everything seems lost. That guy with a venomous smile reminds Ethan of all his constant losses. He knows his story well, marked by pain and loneliness, by absences that have become relentless ghosts. Ethan gets taken to a top-secret base where the higher-ups go over his record with a fine-tooth comb, his strategic wins, his mistakes, and his growing reputation as a wild card. They no longer see him as just a soldier, but as an ambiguous figure, dangerous to some, indispensable to others. He might be humanity's last hope. Meanwhile, the entity keeps spreading its grip, taking control of countries and with them their nuclear arsenals. The whole world trembles under the shadow of an intelligence that no longer hides. In the crisis room, the tension cuts through the silence like a knife. World leaders analyze the growing threat with mounting concern. If the entity isn't stopped, it'll destroy everything in its path, turning the planet into a smoking, barren wasteland. Just when everything seems about to fall apart, a respected voice rises above the chaos. It points to Ethan as the only one with the real power to stop the entity. Those words spark a flicker of hope. Right when the debate hits its breaking point, the president walks into the room with steady steps and a determined gaze, leaving no room for argument. But before she can even speak, a report bursts onto the main screen. The entity has taken control of the United Kingdom's nuclear arsenal. A deadly silence sweeps over the room. The threat has crossed an irreversible line. Faced with the looming disaster, the president breaks all protocol and orders Ethan's immediate release. His mission is clear and absolute: destroy the entity. Failure is not an option, no matter the cost. Ethan is rushed to an aircraft carrier, where preparations begin for what might be the most dangerous operation of his life. The location where the submarine hiding the source code is believed to be lies within Russian territorial waters. The presence of a US vessel in that zone could very well ignite the spark of World War III. But that ain't the biggest hurdle. The exact location of the submarine's still a mystery. All they got are guesses, navigation patterns, shaky estimates, and a gut feeling that's almost suicidal. Diving into the cold, abyssal northern waters is basically a death sentence. And even if Ethan pulls off the mission, he's gotta come back alive, get revived right away, and go through a pressurization chamber to avoid his organs totally collapsing. It's a suicide mission, no doubt about it, but Ethan doesn't hesitate. He walks up to the lieutenant on the carrier with unshakable determination, fully aware there's no room for mistakes. All he needs is one shot, one tiny opening to finish what he started. Meanwhile, in the privacy of her office, the president confides in one of her advisors that they're gonna try to stop Ethan soon, but everything's been a carefully planned move, a distraction to buy Ethan time so he can act without interference or direct surveillance. Kittredge already had a hunch about Ethan's next move. A crooked smile on Kittredge's face showed his confidence that they'd catch him soon enough. Meanwhile, Ethan's team moved quietly toward a remote station, hunting for the creator of the Black Station, a key expert who held the technical knowledge to give them access to the code they desperately needed. But before they could get his help, the facility was suddenly stormed by heavily armed Russian troops, forcing the scientist into a desperate retreat as the tension shot straight to the breaking point. Meanwhile, Ethan was making his way toward a deserted island where the sunken submarine was believed to be hidden, but the Russian radar caught wind of the move just in time. The distance was closing fast and they were barely 5 minutes from the target. In a last-ditch effort, they managed to get within just 1 minute of their destination before Russian fighters mercilessly intercepted them. With no other choice, Ethan plunged into the freezing ocean waters, his heart ice cold and adrenaline pushing him down into the depths. Not long after, an allied submarine covertly positioned nearby picked him up. Without wasting a second, he transmitted the mission details and waited for his team's precise coordinates. They only needed one thing, a signal, a spark that could guide them straight to the very core of the entity. That spark was about to ignite amidst the fire and chaos of battle. In a remote cabin, the team was holding off a fierce assault by Russian forces. The fight exploded with unrestrained violence, bullets whizzing, explosions roaring, and screams tearing through the air. Though they managed to prevail, the victory came at a steep price. The cabin was engulfed in flames, taking with it the only radio capable of sending the Morse code. Yet the cabin's owner, the only one who knew the exact coordinates of the lost submarine, defied the thick smoke, blistering heat, and trembling limbs to reach the radio and send out the crucial signal. Just after completing his mission, he was trapped by the raging fire. Deep in the Arctic Ocean, aboard the covert submarine, Ethan stayed sharp and on the move, trying to keep his mind clear through physical exercise while the world around him threatened to fall apart. But a closer danger was brewing right on board. Out of nowhere, one of the crew suddenly attacked him with wild fury, claiming that the entity had to be preserved as the symbol of the New World Order. The confrontation was violent, brutal, and nearly broke Ethan. But just in time, a woman burst in and took down the traitor with a precise shot that knocked him out cold. She stood there stunned, barely able to wrap her head around how someone from their own crew could have given in to the enemy's cause. There was no time for questions or mourning, cause right at that exact moment, a Russian sub that had been shadowing the area for hours locked onto the exact coordinates of the sunken submarine guarding the entity's source code. Their plan was simple but deadly: track every move of the American sub without losing sight. Wherever Ethan went, they'd be right behind him. Faced with this immediate threat, Ethan made a desperate call. He ordered a course change to pull away from the target. He couldn't risk leading the enemy straight to the entity's core. He had to break off. He was going to take the chance of going it alone. The plan was as simple as it was reckless: trick the Russian sub into chasing the American one while Ethan dove solo into the abyss. Decked out in an experimental diving suit, never before tested in conditions this extreme, with crushing depths and freezing temperatures, he plunged into the void with nothing but hope backing him. The odds of making it were damn near impossible, but there wasn't another viable option. Submerged in total silence, crushed under tons of pressure, and wrapped in pitch black darkness, Ethan finally reached the sunken submarine. Inside, the lifeless bodies of the crew floated like silent witnesses to an irreversible tragedy. He closed his eyes for a second and his mind flashed with images of the disaster: muffled screams, sudden explosions, metal tearing apart like it was being ripped into by some invisible, relentless force. The hull kept sinking, its structure collapsing slow but sure, like a sentence you can't escape. Without wasting a second, Ethan found the compartment where the source code was stored and secured it. But time was working against him. He needed a way out fast. He spotted a missile launch tube, but it was way too tight to fit through with the suit on. He had no choice but to strip it off, risking exposure to the icy water without any protection. With his skin burned raw from the cold and on the edge of thermal shock, he managed to get out of the submarine, but his oxygen tank got stuck in the narrow passage. With no other choice, he took it off and began his ascent on a single breath. His air ran out, his lungs started collapsing, and the suffocation became unbearable. Just when death seemed certain, Grace showed up, just like the plan had called for. She dove into the water, pulled him out, and revived him just in time. She got him into the pressurization chamber. Ethan was still alive, though barely. But the mission wasn't over yet. Back on the command plane, the next phase kicked off, the destruction of the entity. According to confidential intel, the entity had chosen its final refuge, an impenetrable bunker known as the Vault of the End of the World, a fortress built to withstand even a nuclear apocalypse. It thought it was safe there, completely untouchable. Ethan and his team had one last play. The key was Gabriel, who still held the pill with the digital poison, capable of breaking down the entity's source code from within. Pretending to surrender, they planned to sneak him into the vault, aiming to inject the poison right into the core while the entity was distracted. But they knew the margin for error was razor thin. The entity already suspected something, and once the betrayal was uncovered, it had the power to unleash hell. Simultaneous launches of nuclear missiles from Russia, China, the UK, wiping out over half of humanity. That's why the execution of the plan had to be razor-sharp, almost surgical. While Gabriel carried out his part, Grace took on the most critical mission, to disconnect the backup system where the entity might try to hide. Her job was to completely isolate it from all global networks and lock it down inside a physical supermemory before the mass destruction protocol kicked in. It was a race against the clock, where even a single extra second could mean total annihilation. The world had reached the point of no return. The entity had seized full control of the Russian nuclear arsenal, and all of humanity was hanging by a thread, teetering on the edge of an unimaginable disaster. From deep inside her bunker, the president received a proposal just as bold as it was brutal, to launch a preemptive strike, firing missiles at the nuclear arsenals already under the entity's control, before those weapons could be turned against humanity. It was a desperate move, maybe the only option still left on the table. If they didn't act fast, the entity could seize the US nuclear arsenal too, tipping the scales toward total collapse for good. Still, the dilemma was impossible to dodge. The implications of such a decision ran deep, morally, politically, existentially. Even if they survived the fight, what would be left was a torn-apart planet, trapped in endless war, bearing scars that could never be healed. Meanwhile, Ethan and his team managed to arrive at the Vault of the End of the World, a secret facility buried deep beneath impenetrable layers of ice, steel, and concrete, built to withstand even the final judgment. Only Ethan made it inside the server room, where he came face to face with Gabriel. Gabriel, carrying a portable nuclear bomb with the timer in hand and an escape route already planned, demanded the immediate surrender of the source code. But just when everything seemed to be hanging by a thread, Kittredge burst in unexpectedly, completely wrecking the plan. Without hesitation, Gabriel triggered the timer and the countdown began. Right away, a violent firefight broke out in the vault's narrow hallways. His men opened fire with brutal fury, unleashing a savage shootout within the tight confines of the bunker. Amid the chaos, Gabriel managed to slip away while Kittredge and his accomplice vanished like shadows, leaving behind nothing but confusion. Though the nuclear device was deactivated just in time, the conventional explosion was still underway. They all knew someone had to stay behind to contain the damage. That's when an elderly veteran couple, together with a cop fully committed to the cause until the end, made the hardest choice to sacrifice themselves. They did it with a calm mix of courage and resignation. They said their goodbyes, sealed the vault's doors, and braced for the blast, knowing their sacrifice would buy those crucial extra minutes. Inside, the group managed to take shelter in the server room. However, he was badly wounded. A bullet had pierced his body and his breathing grew more labored by the second, struggling right on the edge of collapse. Meanwhile, outside, Gabriel was fleeing in a small plane, but Ethan wasn't about to give up. He grabbed another aircraft and launched into a high-stakes aerial chase, turning the skies into a desperate battleground, filled with reckless maneuvers, sharp shooting, and brutal ramming. In the underground hideout, despite his critical condition, one of them kept giving orders with a clarity that defied the pain. Grace, barely breathing but with iron determination, managed to access the central server. With a broken yet steady voice, she shouted that the entity had to be lured to the core. She ordered that teammate they'd pulled out of prison to get ready to step in. He was about to suffer a shutdown, and every second that passed grew more crucial. Back in Washington, overwhelmed by regret and the unbearable pressure of the moment, the president made a critical call. She canceled at the very last second the launch of the US nuclear missiles. She ordered the systems shut down, the warheads halted, and the entire activation sequence stopped. It was an act of humanity, a stand of restraint staring right into the abyss. But just when the tension seemed to start easing, an assassination attempt shattered the fragile calm inside the presidential bunker. A man armed to the teeth burst in violently, opening fire with the clear intent to take out the president. In a moment of supreme courage, a general reacted instinctively, throwing himself in the path of the bullet. The shot hit him square in the chest, taking his life and saving the president with his sacrifice. It was in that chaotic moment, taking advantage of the general confusion, that the entity made its final move. It seized total control over the United States nuclear arsenal. The global countdown kicked off with no chance for rollback. Within seconds, every nuclear missile on the planet was on high alert, turned into an imminent threat against the very existence of humanity. Meanwhile, deep inside the underground facility, Grace and one of her allies, already connected to the system from the server room, waited with bated breath, tension thick in the air for the final phase of the plan to unfold. Ethan inserting the pill with the digital poison into the core of the entity's source code. But Ethan was still deep in the fight, tearing through the skies in a relentless aerial battle. Every maneuver, every single second was a struggle just to survive. In a final struggle inside the enemy aircraft, he managed to snatch from Gabriel the key that held the digital poison. It was a game-changing moment. During the clash, Gabriel lost his balance and fell into the void, vanishing into the high-altitude air currents. Minutes later, his body slammed violently into the ground, putting an irreversible end to one of the most immediate threats. Still, the war was far from over. The world was hanging by a thread, but in that desperate move, a spark of hope shone through. The chance to undo the inevitable was still within reach for those who refused to give up the fight. Gabriel's death marked a before and after. His fall was final, but it wasn't the end of the battle. Ethan's plane, badly damaged in the confrontation, couldn't stay in the air anymore. Without hesitation, he jumped into the void. The parachute deployed at the last second, letting him descend alive, driven by a single mission: to insert the pill with the digital poison right into the core of the entity's source code. After landing, he got into the central server where Grace helped him with surgical precision during the critical process of shutting down the main memory. The system went dark. The entity was isolated, silenced, defeated. When it all seemed like it had reached the point of no return, the missiles started shutting down one after another. Against all odds, the three heroes who stayed right beside the nuclear bomb, the elderly veteran couple and the young cop, managed to deactivate the main charge. But the secondary detonators went off, unleashing a shockwave that shook the very foundations of the vault. For 10 seconds, that felt like forever. The whole world held its breath. It was just enough, barely the margin they needed to avoid total disaster. Instinctively, the three of them ran to the armored storage room deep inside the vault of the end of the world, slamming the door shut just before the flames reached them. Against all logic, they survived. They were alive. Meanwhile, Ethan held in his hands the pill that had ended the entity. But that small device held something else, a hidden message. It was Luther's voice, weak but steady, recorded shortly before he died. He knew he wouldn't make it. In that recording, he left his farewell, a calm thank you, a reflection on the value of what they'd protected, and a reminder of why they fought. Ethan listened in silence, his eyes welling up, feeling his soul tremble without needing words. That's when Kittredge showed up, rolling in with a squad of armed men. He came to claim the source code, but Ethan, fearless as ever, held up his open palm. The code was gone, destroyed, forever. Days later, tucked away in some hidden corner of the world, the team got back together. No speeches, no celebrations, just deep looks, loaded with everything they'd been through. They were the survivors of an invisible war, witnesses to a battle the rest of humanity would never even know about. Only Grace dared to step up to Ethan. Without a word, she handed him a sealed supermemory. Inside it, the entity remained trapped, locked away in eternal silence. Ethan held it in his hands, looked to Grace, then to each one of his teammates. In his eyes was a message his lips didn't have to say, a huge, silent, and honest thank you. Then without another word, he turned and walked away. One by one, the others followed their own paths. No medals, no applause, but deep down they all knew, without a doubt, they had saved the world when nobody else could.